In the realm of UFO conspiracies, few tales are as elaborate and intriguing as the legend of Project Serpo. This story, part military secret, part science fiction, centres on an alleged exchange program between the United States government and an extraterrestrial species known as the Ebens. According to whistleblower claims and online lore, 12 American service members travelled to an alien planet in the Zeta Reticuli star system and lived there for over a decade, in a program sanctioned at the highest levels of the Cold War era US military. Was this an extraordinary secret mission of scientific exchange, or an elaborate hoax that took on a life of its own? In this video we'll delve into the origins of the Ebens, the timeline of the Serpo exchange program, the journey through space and life on an alien world, and the aftermath of the team's return. Along the way we'll meet the key figures who leaked the story, examine the evidence, or lack thereof, address the skeptics, and consider the cultural impact of this enduring UFO legend. My name is Nex, and welcome to the Nex Archives. In July 1947, an incident near Roswell, New Mexico ignited the modern UFO era, and according to later lore, marked humanity's first encounter with the beings called Ebens. The US Army recovered wreckage of a mysterious flying disc and alien bodies from a crash site in the New Mexico desert. As the story goes, one extraterrestrial survived a Roswell crash and was taken into US custody. Military personnel gave this being water as it declined food, and brought it to a secure facility at Los Alamos for study. Classified reports referred to the creature as an EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity, which later evolved into the nickname Eben for its species. According to the Project Serpo narrative, this surviving Eben provided key information to its captors. It established communication with the American authorities, and even revealed the location of its home planet in the Zeta Reticuli star system. Over the next several years, the Eben reportedly cooperated with scientists and military officials. Before its death in 1952, the alien visitor had helped the US understand items recovered from the crash, such as possible communication device, and used that technology to contact its home world. In April 1964, nearly 17 years after Roswell, the groundwork for an extraordinary meeting was laid. Following arrangements made via the Ebens communications, 2 alien spacecraft arrived in the New Mexico desert for a planned rendezvous. One crash initially landed at the wrong location near Corona, New Mexico, but another touched down at the agreed site near Holloman Air Force Base. During this meeting, US officials returned the remains of deceased Eben crew members recovered in 1947, and in exchange information was shared between the Ebens and humans. Communication was made possible by the aliens' advanced translation device, allowing them to speak English with the Americans. This successful encounter paved the way for a far bolder venture, a full-fledged exchange program that would send humans to the Ebens' distant planet. In the wake of the 1964 contact, the US government secretly greenlit Project Serpo, an unprecedented exchange program with the extraterrestrials. The plan was ambitious and daring. 12 specially selected American military personnel would travel to the Ebens' home planet, known colloquially as Serpo, aboard an alien spacecraft, and an Eben envoy would remain on Earth. The exchange was set to last for about 10 years. President John F. Kennedy, according to some accounts, had been informed of and approved the program in the early 1960s, reflecting his interest in space and the unknown. To assemble the Serpo team, the military purportedly sought out elite volunteers with specialised skills and no close family ties. The mission was so secret that the participants would be stricken from military records and could never contact home again. Around a dozen men and women were chosen from an initial pool of hundreds of candidates. Ultimately, the team consisted of 10 men and 2 women, all military personnel trained in disciplines like medicine, linguistics, science, engineering, and security. The volunteers underwent rigorous preparation in absolute secrecy. Training included astronomy to familiarize them with the Zeta Reticuli system, survival courses for alien environments, basic Eben language lessons, and even exercises to cope with the psychological strain of isolation and otherworldly conditions. By mid-1965, the team was ready for their cosmic journey. On July 16, 1965, as the story goes, the exchanged crew boarded an Ebens spacecraft at a secure location in the Nevada test site, not far from the infamous Area 51. The alien craft was sizable and capable of carrying not only 12 humans, but also over 40 tons of equipment and supplies, which included vehicles and scientific gear that the team brought along. With final farewells and one Eben visitor staying behind on Earth, the ship lifted off, embarking the Americans on a voyage 39 light years away to planet Serpo. Travelling to Zeta Reticuli pushed the limits of what anyone thought possible. The Eben craft, according to the account, did not rely on conventional rocket propulsion. It employed advanced technology that allowed for faster than light travel, something our physics cannot yet achieve. In fact, the crew reported that the vessel traversed space at approximately 40 times the speed of light, making the interstellar trip in just about 9 to 10 months. Believers argue that the Ebens used a form of antimatter propulsion or even wormholes to attain these speeds. By early 1966, the human team would find themselves farther from Earth than any people in history, truly in alien territory. The journey was not easy on the human passengers. Almost immediately after departure, crew members experienced disorientation and severe motion sickness due to the extreme speed and unfamiliar conditions. The Ebens had anticipated this. They placed each human in a specialized individual bubble or stasis pod that helped stabilize their biological functions for the long trip. Even so, time became distorted for the travelers. Crew members drifted in and out of consciousness, losing track of days and weeks. Standard Earth clocks and calendars became meaningless as they hurtled through space. The team eventually adjusted to an Eben-defined time system aboard the ship. Tragically, one of the 12 astronauts did not survive the voyage. A crew member designated as number 308, one of the mission's pilots, died en route to Serpo, apparently from a pulmonary embolism that could not be treated in time. The others could only place his body in stasis. This loss would later take on an eerie dimension. The story claims that the Ebens, in their scientific curiosity, used a deceased man's DNA to conduct cloning or hybrid experiments during the journey. A revelation that deeply disturbed the human team when they learned of it. It was a grim omen of the cultural and ethical gaps the crew would face in dealing with an alien civilization. After roughly 10 months, the spaceship finally arrived at its destination, Serpo, the mysterious home world of the Ebens. The date was around late 1965 or early 1966 by Earth's calendar, though for the travellers keeping exact time had become nearly impossible. They were about to become the first humans to set foot on an exoplanet, over 200 trillion miles from home. Stepping off the craft, the human team found themselves under an alien sky. The planet Serpo, so named in the leaked reports, possibly a nickname or mispronunciation of an Eben term, is described as Earth-like, but smaller, with a breathable atmosphere and gravity slightly less than Earth's. What immediately struck the astronauts was the intense sunlight. Serpo's sky had 2 bright suns. The world orbits a double star system, resulting in relentless daylight and radiation on much of the planet's surface. There was very little true nighttime, as one of the 2 suns was almost always in the sky. The brightness and twin shadows were disorienting at first, and the temperature in the equatorial region was sweltering, reportedly reaching 60 degrees Celsius or 140 degrees Fahrenheit in the day. The team soon realised they could not stay long in the landing zone's climate. With the Ebens host help, the humans relocated to a more temperate region at higher latitude, a place of forests and mountains they nicknamed Little Montana for its resemblance to the American West. There the weather was more comfortable and water was plentiful, allowing the visitors to establish a base camp on alien soil. As they settled in, the humans began to learn about the Ebens civilization and Serpo's environment. The Ebens turned out to be a highly advanced but oddly simple society. Physically, Ebens were humanoid but smaller than humans, roughly 4 feet tall with a delicate build. Their skin had a brownish tone, and they had large almond-shaped eyes, somewhat reminiscent of the grey aliens of UFO lore, though Ebens were described as not exactly the same as greys. The team noted that the Ebens lived in modest villages and towns, not in sprawling high-tech cities. There were around 650,000 Ebens on the whole planet, a relatively low population spread across different settlements. Eben dwellings were simple and functional, and the culture appeared cooperative and communal. In fact, Ebens had no currency or money, and no real concept of greed. Resources like food and tools were distributed as needed, and everyone had a role in society. Crime was apparently non-existent. The astronauts observed that the values of Eben society emphasized peace, harmony, and mutual support. Despite their simple living arrangements, the Ebens possessed technology far beyond our own. They were an advanced race, said to be thousands of years ahead of us in certain sciences. For instance, their craft's propulsion and energy systems were incredibly sophisticated. The exchange crew eventually learned that Serpo's energy infrastructure relied on an antimatter power source. One described device was a crystal rectangle, which could produce enormous amounts of power on demand, automatically adjusting its output to perfectly meet the consumption needs at any moment. This item was so intriguing that the crew brought one back to Earth for study. The Ebens also demonstrated anti-gravity technology and the ability to bend space-time for faster-than-light travel, as evidenced by their journey. To the astonishment of the human team, the Ebens even had a kind of high-tech archive called a Yellow Book, a holographic device that could visually replay historical events, including scenes from Earth's past, in 3-dimensional detail. When a user held the Yellow Book, it somehow interacted with their mind and language, displaying information or answering questions, a bit like an interactive history lesson from an alien perspective. One can imagine the awe, and perhaps fear, this device inspired in the astronauts, seeing Earth's history through alien eyes. Daily life on Serpo was a mix of wonders and challenges for the humans. The Ebens were generally welcoming and gentle hosts. They attempted to make their human guests comfortable, though many aspects of Eben life took getting used to. The food was one example. Ebens were largely vegetarian, growing edible plants in hydroponic facilities. Their food had little taste by American standards, and initially the crew found it bland or unappealing. Over time they adjusted, and some Eben foods even seemed to have medicinal properties, helping the humans recover quickly from illnesses or fatigue. Ebens did not appear to suffer from diseases like humans do, Their medical technology included light-based healing instruments. For example, they used a blue beam of light that could accelerate healing or cure ailments, something the team witnessed with amazement. Communication was another hurdle. The Ebens had a tonal language that the human team struggled to learn. Fortunately, several Ebens could understand basic English, thanks to the prior contact and perhaps studying the language, and they had translation devices to facilitate conversations. Over the years, some team members became conversant in the Eben tongue, and a few Ebens learned to understand the American speech. Through these exchanges, the humans learned about Eben history and cosmology. Intriguingly, Eben elders told a story that their species did not originate on Serpo. They had colonized Serpo after migrating from another planet in their distant past. Their original home world had been threatened by catastrophe. Some legends spoke of volcanic upheavals, which forced the Ebens to relocate to Serpo millennia ago. By their reckoning, the Eben civilization on Serpo was about 10,000 years old, tracing back to that resettlement, a detail revealed in later released documents. This backstory added a new perspective. The Ebens themselves were survivors and explorers of a sort, not native to the land they now inhabited. Life on an alien planet was not idyllic for the Serpo expedition. The humans faced numerous challenges and ethical dilemmas during their 13-year stay. One major issue was health. The intense radiation and heat on Serpo took a toll on the team despite moving to cooler climates. Medical logs, as later reported, indicated that 2 members of the team died during the mission. One from an illness possibly related to radiation exposure, and another in an accident. The exact causes are somewhat unclear in the law. These 2 were buried on Serpo with full honours, and the Ebens consoled the remaining humans of their grief. Other incidents tested the cultural understanding between humans and Ebens. The Americans, accustomed to a non-vegetarian diet, eventually killed some local fauna to obtain meat, despite the Ebens advising against it. In one stark account, a team member shot a snake-like creature, described as having eerie human-like eyes, out of hunger or fear. When they dissected the animal, they were shocked to find its internal biology was oddly similar to humans, a discovery that raised unsettling questions about evolutionary coincidences, or perhaps past connections between Earth life and Serpo. The Ebens were reportedly upset by the killing. They considered the Serpo ecosystem and creatures to be under their protection. This conflict highlighted the ethical gulf between the species. Ebens did not kill animals for food, and had asked the humans to refrain from lethal violence on their planet. Such events caused friction within the team as well, as some members realised they might be seen as primitive or brutal by the peaceful Eben society. Over time, a few of the Americans grew deeply attached to Serpo and the Ebens. Whether out of scientific fascination, a sense of belonging, or even love, 2 members of the team ultimately chose not to return to Earth at all. These 2 volunteered to remain on Serpo permanently and live out their lives among the Ebens. One was said to be a female doctor on the team, and another, a male scientist. Both felt more at home on Serpo than back on Earth by the end of the mission. Their fates after 1978 are unknown, but the story implies they continued as willing residents of Serpo, possibly still alive if one believes the tale. Those who did plan to come home faced a challenge of a different sort, keeping track of time. The mission was supposed to last 10 Earth years, but the humans became confused by Serpo's longer days and different orbit. By the time they realised it, the planned decade had stretched into 13 years on Serpo. When the exchange craft finally returned them, it was 1978. The remaining team, now 8 members according to the most accepted version, prepared to depart Serpo. It was a bittersweet farewell, they had formed bonds with the Ebens community, and leaving 2 comrades behind was difficult. In the end, 7 men and 1 woman boarded the spacecraft for the journey home, carrying with them loads of collected data, samples, and perhaps a few Ebens technological artifacts as souvenirs. In 1978, the Ebens vessel carrying the 8 returnees landed back on Earth at the agreed location in Nevada, exactly where they had departed 13 years earlier. The returning astronauts, now middle-aged and having lived through an experience no other humans had, were immediately taken into secure custody by US authorities. The government was determined to debrief the team extensively, and also to keep their astonishing journey a tightly held secret. The individuals were said to be in good health overall, though they had some lingering effects from exposure to Serpo's environment. They also brought back the bodies of the 2 crew members who had died, as well as the body of the one who perished en route, all of which were delivered to Earth for proper examination and burial. The returnees entered a lengthy period of quarantine and debriefing. According to law, they were kept isolated in various military installations from 1978 until 1984, while intelligence officials and scientists pored over their accounts. Each of the 8 wrote extensive reports and was interrogated repeatedly to capture every detail of Serpo's society, technology, and biology. Thousands of pages of transcripts and diaries were compiled. In fact, one of the team, the mission commander, supposedly wrote a 3,000-page report recounting the entire experience, essentially a comprehensive diary of the Serpo mission. The debriefing documents also included star charts of the Zeta Reticuli system drawn by the crew, medical records of the team's adaptation to Serpo's environment, and technical schematics of devices they observed or brought back. For the returned travellers, reintegration into Earth life proved impossible. They had been officially listed as dead or missing in action to their families back in 1965. Now, after almost 2 decades, the government could not exactly parade them back into society without explaining where they'd been. Thus, the 8 returnees lived out their remaining years under new identities and constant supervision. Some accounts say they were kept on military bases under assumed names, and that all of them ultimately died from complications believed to be caused by exposure to high radiation on Serpo. By 1988, approximately 10 years after their return, reportedly none of the Serpo teams were still alive. The secrecy around the project was so intense that even the team's immediate family members never learned the truth. Families were told that their loved ones had perished in training accidents or covert operations with no bodies to recover. The Serpo exchange program, as far as the public record was concerned, never happened. For decades, Project Serpo remained a closely guarded secret, if it indeed occurred. No hint of it reached the public during the Cold War. The first glimpse of this sensational tale surfaced in the early 1980s, then dramatically again in the mid-2000s, through a series of leaks and whistleblower claims that spread online like wildfire. In 1983, investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe, known for her UFO research, was invited to Kirtland Air Force Base under curious circumstances. There, a man claiming to be a USAF sergeant and intelligence officer, Richard C. Doty, showed Howe a secret briefing document that astonished her. Among other explosive claims, this document allegedly described an exchange program with extraterrestrials from Zeta Reticuli, essentially a summary of what we now call Project Serpo. Howe was promised official records to use in an HBO documentary she was developing, but at the last minute the Air Force contact pulled out and no evidence was given. The encounter ended with more questions than answers. This incident, revealed by Howe later, is significant because it shows some version of the Serpo story was being dangled in front of UFO researchers as early as the 1980s. The Serpo saga truly exploded into public view in November 2005, when a person using the pseudonym Request Anonymous began posting a series of astonishing claims on a private UFO email list moderated by enthusiast Victor Martinez. Anonymous introduced himself as a retired government employee with a direct knowledge of a program sending Americans to an alien planet. Between late 2005 and 2006, this source released multiple installments of the information, sometimes written as if quoting official reports or personal diaries of the Serpo team. The emails detailed everything: the Roswell origins, the selection of the 12 astronauts, the journey, the environment of Serpo, the deaths and return, technical data, and more. The post had a level of granular detail that had captivated readers. By early 2006, the Serpo.org website was created by a researcher named Bill Ryan to archive and share these Project Serpo releases with a wider audience. The story caught fire on UFO forums and even garnered attention from paranormal radio shows. It was as if a bombshell disclosure was unfolding in real time on the internet. Victor Martinez, who ran the original email list, acted as a conduit for Anonymous's information, but did not know Anonymous's true identity. Bill Ryan became the public face of championing the Serpo story. He conducted interviews and maintained the Serpo website. There were also contributions from others in the UFO community. For instance, Linda Moulton Howe herself received a phone call from a man in 2006, corroborating parts of the Serpo tale, which she discussed on Coast to Coast AM radio. UFO authors like Len Kasten were so convinced that they later wrote books presenting the Serpo story as true history. The online UFO community split between fascinated believers and skeptical investigators who smelled a possible hoax. Before long, suspicion zeroed in on the likely architect behind Anonymous. Researchers from a group called Reality Uncovered launched an investigation and uncovered strong evidence that Richard C. Doty, the same former Air Force intelligence sergeant who had teased Linda Howe with documents in 1983, was deeply involved in Serpo postings. Doty's fingerprints were seemingly all over the emails, including matching IP addresses, according to the investigators. It appeared that Doty, possibly along with a small team of associates, had fabricated or supplied the Serpo information as a grand hoax or disinformation campaign. In fact, Reality Uncovered identified 3 primary contributors behind the scenes: Richard Doty and 2 close associates in the UFO intel world, Dr. Christopher Kit Green and Dr. Harold Hal Puthoff, a physicist and researcher of paranormal phenomena. Emails between these individuals were intercepted that allegedly shown them coordinating the gradual release of the story. The Reality Uncovered investigators humorously dubbed this trio the Imaginary Intelligence Agency, or Scammers Incorporated, implying that Serpo was a coordinated scam on the UFO community. Richard Doty, when confronted, denied being anonymous, and to this day he publicly maintains he was not behind the Serpo hoax. However, many in the ufology world find that denial hard to believe given Doty's history. In the 1980s, Doty was involved in the notorious Paul Bennewitz affair, feeding false UFO narratives to a civilian UFO researcher, which contributed to Bennewitz's mental breakdown. Doty was also linked to the creation of the fraudulent Majestic 12 documents. By the 2000s, Doty had a reputation as, in one journalist's words, a notoriously slippery disinformation agent. Thus, discovering his connection to Serpo immediately cast doubt on the entire story. Interestingly, one cannot ignore the pop culture parallel. Steven Spielberg's 1977 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind ends with a team of scientists exchanging places with aliens, a plot point uncannily similar to Project Serpo. Some Serpo enthusiasts speculated that Spielberg had somehow known of the real exchange program and then coded it into the movie. In reality, the timeline doesn't support that. The alleged exchange wasn't known about until after the film. However, a curious anecdote is often cited. Spielberg once mentioned that NASA wrote him a 20-page letter asking him not to make Close Encounters, apparently fearing it would cause mass hysteria over UFOs. UFO buffs love to interpret that as NASA knowing something, but Spielberg clarified it was more about not encouraging public UFO frenzy. Still, the coincidence of art imitating alleged reality adds to Serpo's mystique. If nothing else, the Serpo story's popularity in the mid-2000s may have been boosted by the cultural memory of Close Encounters and its alien exchange scene. By 2007, the Serpo hype was dying down. Bill Ryan, after championing the story for over a year, announced in March 2007 that he was stepping down as webmaster of Serpo.org and distancing from the active promotion of the material. Ryan still believed some exchange program had occurred, but he had come to accept that the Serpo releases were mixed with disinformation. In other words, not entirely true or accurate. Victor Martinez ceased public updates. The storyline had concluded with release 23 in 2006 anyway, essentially telling the whole tale up to the return and the deaths of the crew. Len Kasten's pro-Serpo book in 2013 gave it one last boost in mainstream attention, and even as late as 2019, Kasten appeared on the radio show Coast to Coast AM, reiterating that Serpo tale is true. But by and large, the UFO community had moved on, chalking up Project Serpo as either unproven or outright fabrication. From the moment it emerged, Project Serpo's credibility has been hotly debated. Serious UFO researchers and scientists have largely viewed the Serpo story with deep skepticism, citing many red flags, suggesting a hoax or fictional concoction. Here we address the major points of doubt. There is no physical or documentary evidence publicly available to verify the Serpo exchange. No photos, no genuine government documents, no first-hand witnesses have ever come forward in person. All information traces back to anonymous or unverifiable sources. Even supporters admit that essentially all we have are the stories posted by Anonymous, and a few corroborating comments, an extremely flimsy basis for such an extraordinary claim. The absence of any leaked proof in over 40 years is a major strike against the story's reality. As discussed, the heavy involvement of Sergeant Richard C. Doty in propagating the Serpo tale taints its credibility. Doty is a known disinformation operative who was admitting to spreading false UFO stories in the past as part of counterintelligence duties. Many researchers suspect Serpo was just another one of Doty's weapons of mass deception, perhaps intended to mislead UFO enthusiasts or cover up real secret projects by injecting outrageous false storylines. If Doty was behind Anonymous, and the evidence strongly suggests he was, it's hard to believe that the narrative isn't largely fabricated. Investigators have pointed out numerous factual errors and logical inconsistencies within the Serpo postings. For example, one early release claimed 12 went and 8 returned, with 2 dying and 2 staying. But basic maths says that would leave only 8 coming home, not the 7 that the same text in places implied. Later clarifications adjusted it to 8 returnees, as we noted. Another glaring issue was the provisioning. The post stated that the team brought about 9,000 pounds of supplies, including sea rations for the trip. However, a simple calculation shows 12 people over 10 years would need 130 plus tons of food if they relied on sea rations, a far cry from the 4.5 tons available. Believers counted that the team switched to Ebens food eventually, but it's one of many things that doesn't add up. There were also typos and mistakes in the released texts that suggested a human hoaxer struggling with consistency, rather than an official polished document. The physics and astronomy of Serpo raise many doubts. Zeta Reticuli is a widely separated binary star. The two stars are about a light year apart. A planet orbiting one would not get notable radiation from the distant second star. Yet the story harps on about intense radiation from two suns as a key challenge on Serpo. The travel speed claim 40 times light speed also got scrutinised. If Serpo is 39 light years away, 40C travel should take 11.7 months, not the 9 to 10 claimed, unless wormholes were in play. Wormholes, of course, are speculative and would presumably eliminate most travel time, not just a little. The planet's orbit in the binary system would likely be unstable or have huge seasonal climate swings, which calls into question how a comfortable habitable climate with Earth-like life exists as described. Additionally, Zeta Reticuli stars are younger than our Sun, about 2 billion years younger, which lowers, though doesn't eliminate, the probability of an advanced civilization there. None of these issues disprove Serpo, but they collectively make the scenario sound scientifically implausible. As one review wryly noted, believers had to invoke wormholes and other exotic explanations to paper over the basic math problems and astrophysical unlikelihoods. Skeptics argue that much of the Serpo story seems derivative of earlier science fiction and UFO mythology. The concept of an alien exchange program resembles the ending of Close Encounters as mentioned, and also echoes themes from UFO lore, like the alleged Project Aquarius briefing documents that circulated in ufology in the 1980s. Some parallels exist with the 1961 Betty and Barney Hill alien abduction story, which also involves Zeta Reticuli star maps, and with claims by discredited ufologists in the 1980s and 90s about government alien cooperation. One reviewer, Roger Rogerson, commented that if a movie is ever made from the Serpo story, Spielberg and the creators of Star Trek would both have a good case for plagiarism, given how cliché and cobbled together the narrative seems. He also quipped that the idea humans could even eat alien foods is absurd, and that Serpo society makes little sense as a source of advanced technology, like simple villagers with starships. In short, many feel the Serpo saga reads like a pastiche of science fiction tropes, rather than a report of real events. Those who don't accept Serpo as true generally fall into two camps: those who call it a blatant hoax for fame or entertainment, and those who think it might have been a deliberate disinformation campaign by some intelligence agency. The disinformation theory suggests that maybe the government wanted to obscure a real secret program, perhaps a terrestrial black project or human space mission, by seeding a fantastical alien story to muddy the waters. However, there's scant evidence for that beyond Dottie's known role in disinformation operations. On the other hand, as a plain hoax, Serpo did spawn a book deal for Dottie and co-author around the same time. The first Dottie-related UFO book, exempt from disclosure, was published in early 2006, conveniently when Serpo was trending, leading some to suspect the posts were viral marketing for the book. Dottie and his collaborators may have simply been testing how gullible the UFO community could be, or enjoying storytelling under anonymity. Either way, the consensus of serious researchers by 2007 was that Project Serpo was a big fat fake. UFO researcher Greg Bishop even titled his 2007 article exactly that, after highlighting contradictions in the accounts. To date, no credible insider has come forward to substantiate Serpo, and no government confirmation exists. The tale remains firmly in the category of modern myth. Ultimately, whether Project Serpo was an elaborate hoax, a kernel of truth wrapped in lies, or a bit of both, it remains one of the most elaborate and fascinating stories in UFO lore. The saga of the Ebens and the secret journey to planet Serpo has all the drama of a Hollywood script. Courageous astronauts, alien worlds, triumphs and tragedies, secrecy and revelation. It invites us to imagine the possibilities, that humans might travel to the stars, that we might not be alone, and that cooperation could exist across the cosmos. At the same time, the tale serves as a reminder to approach extraordinary claims with a critical eye, since the line between fact and fiction can blur easily in the world of conspiracy and secrecy. As we close this video, we acknowledge that no official evidence has ever confirmed Project Serpo. To the mainstream, it's just a story, albeit a very compelling one. But stories have power. Real or not, the legend of the Serpo exchange has sparked conversations about the broader universe and humanity's place in it. It embodies our deepest curiosities and hopes that one day we might truly meet our galactic neighbours. Until that day, Project Serpo remains a thrilling what-if, a cosmic mystery that for many lives on in the space between skepticism and wonder. What do you think about Project Serpo? Leave a comment below and let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, comment and subscribe for more deep dives into many mysteries. This is Nex, signing off.